Blood ties. My mind floated in that space between dreams and memories. The past and present tangled together, spring-loaded, ready to snap like a worn-out rubber band. Was reality any better than the nightmare I kept reliving? I woke abruptly as my cat, Artemis, leaped onto my bed. Ugh, Artemis. I grumbled, but her soft gray fur and wide amber eyes calmed me. She nuzzled my arm, and despite myself, I smiled. Artemis had been my one constant through the ups and downs. Unlike people, cats didn't demand explanations. We had just moved into a Victorian-style home in the heart of New Orleans, and neither of us had quite adjusted to the creaky floors and strange smells. I petted Artemis until she curled into a ball on my chest. I tried to fall back asleep, but the air was thick with an unsettling energy, and I tossed and turned until morning. By the time I arrived at the office, I was exhausted, my patience thin. My job as a real estate assistant to the cold and calculating Vivian Thorne didn't allow for such things. She ran her real estate empire with an iron fist, her striking blue eyes seeing through every facade. Vivian was notorious for her unflinching professionalism. But that day, when I staggered in late, disheveled and barely coherent from the lack of sleep, her piercing gaze lingered on me longer than usual. "Tori, what happened to you? This is unacceptable. Clients rely on us, and we can't afford to slip up." Her voice was smooth, but I could sense the frustration simmering underneath. "I'm sorry, Miss Thorne. It won't happen again," I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady. She dismissed me with a wave, and I retreated to my desk, drowning in a sea of paperwork. I spent the rest of the day avoiding her gaze, knowing I had come dangerously close to losing my job. But something shifted that afternoon. There was a look in Vivian's eyes, something far from professional, a spark that made me uneasy but intrigued. The next few weeks were tense, but I worked harder than ever, determined not to give Vivian any reason to question my dedication. Then one late evening, as we wrapped up a long day of client meetings, Vivian turned to me with an unexpected offer. "Would you like to join me for dinner?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. I hesitated, unsure of her intentions. "Sure," I answered, my curiosity outweighing my caution. The restaurant was dimly lit, intimate. We talked easily, the usual tension between us melting away. I felt drawn to her in a way I hadn't expected. By the time we left, I was undeniably captivated. We stood in front of my apartment, and before I could think better of it, she kissed me. It was the beginning of something dangerous and thrilling. For months, we carried on a secret affair. Vivian's passion matched the intensity of her work ethic, and I found myself falling deeper in love with her, despite the risk. But secrets have a way of catching up. One night, Vivian arrived at my apartment, her face pale and haunted. "My wife knows," she whispered, her voice barely audible. My heart stopped. "What?" "Chloe found out about us. I told her it was over, but I don't think she's going to let this go, Tori. She's not stable." Vivian's voice trembled for the first time since I had known her. I reached for her hand, trying to calm her. "We'll figure it out, Viv. We'll deal with this, okay?" But deep down, I knew this wasn't something we could easily fix. The following night, I woke to a cold draft in my apartment. Artemis wasn't curled up beside me, and my heart raced. I heard the soft creak of the floorboards and immediately knew I wasn't alone. Before I could react, I felt a sharp pain slice across my chest. My vision blurred as I looked up, horrified to see Chloe standing over me with a knife. Her eyes, wild and full of fury, glistened in the dim light. Vivian screamed, rushing into the room, but it was too late. Chloe had already plunged the blade into me again. I collapsed to the floor, feeling the life drain out of me. The last thing I saw before darkness consumed me was Artemis hissing at Chloe from the bed. I should have died that night, but I didn't. Hours later, I woke to find myself alone in a blood-soaked apartment. My wounds had already begun to heal. The truth was I had died once before, long before Vivian came into my life. 2 years ago, I was turned into a vampire by a woman I barely remembered. She left me with nothing but a note explaining my new existence and a warning. To hide, to survive. I had kept that secret from everyone, including Vivian. I didn't crave blood often, only during the full moon. But when I did, it was an uncontrollable need. I stood up, feeling the familiar strength return to my limbs. Chloe had tried to kill me, but she had no idea what she was dealing with. When I found Chloe later that night, she was hiding in her car, shaking. She barely had time to react before I was on her. My hunger took over as I drained her of life. I felt nothing, no guilt, no remorse. She had tried to take everything from me, and now she was nothing. Vivian found me standing over Chloe's lifeless body, her face ashen with horror. But instead of recoiling, she approached me. I had no idea, Tori. Her voice was full of disbelief. I wiped the blood from my mouth and looked into her eyes. I couldn't let her hurt you. I love you, she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. We have to leave, I replied. We can't stay here. She nodded, her expression resolute. Together we packed up and left New Orleans, leaving behind the bloody trail of betrayal and violence. Years later, we settled in a small town far away, where no one knew our names or our pasts. Vivian had embraced her new life as a vampire, and we had built a life together, far from the chaos of our old one. We never spoke of the night Chloe died, but it lingered in the space between us like a dark shadow. Yet despite it all, we found a peace I hadn't thought possible. Love had bound us together. Blood had sealed our fate. And in the end, we had forever to make sense of it all.